Informed Sources is made possible in part by Susie and Pierre G. Villery.
With a lifetime of passion for public television, we are pleased to help underwrite Informed Sources.
Please join us in supporting WYES TV.
Hello, I'm Marcia Kavanaugh. Thanks so much for joining us. Well, Mayor LaToya Cantrell declared the city's police department to be in crisis this week, and with the police chief issued her own decrees, including no longer consenting to the consent decree. Elsewhere, there was decisive action from the courts, including a guilty plea from a former state senator and a crackdown on a landlord whose properties had deteriorated. We'll be talking about these stories, plus the merger of the Insectarium and the aquarium, outrage over rising insurance prices, and on the social side, a surprising budding romance in Baton Rouge. Joining us are tonight's Informed Sources. Errol, Laborde, producer of Informed Sources. John Simerman, reporter, the Times-Picayune, the New Orleans Advocate. Don Ostrom, Channel 12's Future Watch reporter. And Tyler Bridges, staff writer, the Times-Picayune, the New Orleans Advocate. Let's go on over to John first. And you were there yesterday for the press conference with Mayor Cantrell and also Police Chief Ferguson regarding the NOPD and trying to make things better there. What did she have to say?
Yeah, Mayor Cantrell came out on Thursday for the first time really addressing head-on a lot of the morale issues and situations that that officers have complained about, a lot of them as they leave. There's a quick exit of officers from the force, and the mayor stayed home and did the rounds and did a listening tour at all the police districts, and finally came in front of the media yesterday and criticized the media a lot for, she says, contributing to the negativity and the morale problems on the force. But what she said is she put a lot of blame, most of the blame, on the federal consent decree. It's a 10-year-old agreement for reform that was agreed to by Mayor Mitch Landrieu, and basically said that that is the cause for a lot of the complaints about draconian discipline and some of the issues that officers have brought up in their exit interviews, and more recently in what the mayor and Chief Sean Ferguson described as very candid conversations over the last 3 or 4 days.
So you mentioned she stayed home because she was supposed to take an overseas trip and instead stayed home.
Right. There was a lot of criticism about her travel spending. She was supposed to go to Singapore. She was supposed to speak Monday at a cities conference. She stayed home to, quote, embed with the police department. I don't know if what she did was embedding, but she seemed to come out of it with a view that the consent decree is the root of all problems at the NOPD.
So, you know, we're seeing a loss of officers from the NOPD, and that is definitely setting off alarm bells to the point where the force is what? How many strong now?
We're under 1,000, around 970. We haven't been there in forever, in 50 years. For a long time, we were trying to get to 1,575 or 1,600. That's sort of a pipe dream at this point. We're dealing with a, post-George Floyd, where very few people want to be urban city police officer these days. So a lot of headwinds.
So the mayor was certainly critical of the consent decree, saying that it's really just onerous for police officers with reporting, et cetera, and draconian discipline. So what is she proposing be done other than getting out from under the consent decree, which of course it's got to go through the federal courts for that to happen?
Right, and that really shows where things may be at now. In April, the federal judge, Susie Morgan, seemed to indicate that we were on a path, NOPD was on a path to be heading out of the consent decree on a 2-year sort of step-down basis in June. That date has come and gone. No signs of when it might happen. I asked the mayor yesterday, what do you know about this? Why the delay? She said, you tell me. So something's going on where there's been a slowdown. Certainly we've had a share of scandal with police off-duty details of late, and there are several officers under FBI investigation. Certainly this manpower issue has created incredible emergency response times that have really skyrocketed of late, according to Jeff Asher, the data analyst. So, you know, there's things that have happened that have made, you know, greater challenges for the department in the meantime.
So you have talked, and you've taken a look at exit interviews from officers that have left over these recent months. And is that the main thing that they're pointing to in what you've seen, the federal consent decree?
It's not. Certainly restrictions, policy restrictions are part of why officers say they're leaving. And they talk a lot about discipline, unfairness in promotions, and headhunting or targeting in discipline, where an officer, you know, may be looked at for one thing, that thing was fine, and then PIB, the Public Integrity Bureau, which is the Internal Affairs Unit, will get him for another thing. So sort of that kind of stuff. But, you know, the police officer groups say that's not the consent decree, that's PIB. Mm-hmm. They are, you know, they are applying policies under the consent decree, and that there are problems in PIB of a lack of accountability. And so that's really kind of erupted of late. And so we'll see how that fleshes out. The mayor basically says the problems at PIB are on account of the consent decree.
And okay, back to that consent decree she's going to appeal to try to get from under it. What else came up at that press conference in terms of changes?
Well, she wants to tell people that she's listening to officers, and what she came out with is a proposal to see if she can let them loosen up a little, wear beards, loosen up policies on fingernail polish, let them wear shorts in the summer, and different kind of, you know, things that the officers, she said, told her were important to her. There are other things that she's trying to do, which is add a bigger civilian component to the department to answer more calls for service that you know, officers, commissioned officers, of which there are so few, don't really need to do.
Of course, we've seen Councilwoman Helena Moreno also call for that, but you need to go through civil service for that. Are we seeing any action toward that end?
That's been a thing that's come up over the years to increase the civilian participation, and it never really has been a central focus of the department, and it hasn't really necessarily stuck. There are some legal issues around that, certainly training issues, but they're trying to work through them, and, you know, now I guess Councilwoman Moreno is hopeful that finally things will get going, but as she points out, you know, there's been a lot of talk and not so much.
But you know, John, it's interesting that both 10 years ago, when the city first talked about the consent decree, that was seen as being a very advanced and forward-thinking thing to do. And people applauded that move, you know, we're doing the right thing. And it probably was the right thing. I mean, who knows what was learned from it. But now, 10 years later, getting out of it seems like the advanced and forward-thinking thing to do.
Well, we should remember where it came from, which is the Danziger Bridge shootings by police and cover-up, the Henry Glover, and then the Department of Justice came in 2010 at former Mayor Landrieu's invitation, and really rooted around the department and issued a report that found all kinds of constitutional violations. Now, the federal judge, Susie Morgan, has said there have been vast changes. Lots has been done. They're compliant in almost every category or area, is what she says. Again, why we haven't moved a little bit closer, we don't know. There have been sort of these anticipations of getting out of it for at least a couple years now.
Okay. All righty, John. Thanks a lot. We'll see where it all goes. Hey, let's go on over to you. And people are really very upset when they open up their insurance bill and see that it is skyrocketing.
But at least some people are getting insurance bills. Another problem is companies that have bailed out. You know, there have been 4 hurricanes in Louisiana, hitting somewhere in Louisiana since 2020. And so the strain on the insurance company is enormous. So a lot of them just want to bail out. And 7 of them have in the last few years. Of those, the state was able to get 4 of them and get the policies transferred to another company. But there are 3 that they haven't found a solution. And so it's left to the policyholder just to find something out there in the market. So that's the problem. Insurance Commissioner Jim Donnelly had a couple of meetings this week. One was with the Press Club in Baton Rouge, and the other was a big public gathering in New Orleans. And in both, the people were, where can we get relief and how can we get relief? And at the Press Club, Donlin said, look, I'm trying to get together a big meeting in Baton Rouge with the governor and the legislators. We want to do some legal reforms. And he said pretty much the same thing in New Orleans. And people asked, what can we do to make our bills lower? And really, what can you do? I mean, some of it has to do with building, following building codes and maybe tougher building codes, but it's difficult right now. One thing they're pushing is after Katrina, the state started a program. It was called the Insure Louisiana program. And what it was is that the state offered incentives to companies that came into Louisiana. So actually trying to urge them to come in. And they put up like $28 million over the next few years. But a few years ago, they had to shut it down because there were auditing questions and it couldn't be handled then. But people, one thing they're going to be talking about at all those meetings is to bring back a program like that where the state can provide incentive for the insurance companies.
Yeah, because as you said, that's a big problem is that insurers are backing out of Louisiana. They don't want to insure here, write policies here.
Yeah, it happens a lot in the insurance business. I mean, it's happened not just with hurricanes. I remember in high school hearing stories about the state backing out of insuring high school kids because the accident rate was so high, and so the state had to step in. So it's a fairly common thing that things do. I want to say a word about Jim Donlin, though. What's amazing about him is that of the last 4 insurance commissioners before Donlin, 3 of them wound up going to jail. Donlin's in his 15th year with no hint of scandal that I'm aware of. So I think he's brought some stability to that office. And of course, he's from the Jefferson Parish Donlin family.
Right. Well, he's facing some big challenges right now in terms of getting insurance for the residents here and also trying to keep those premiums down because that is a serious problem. Okie doke. Thanks a lot, E. Let's go back on over now to Tyler. And Karen Carter Peterson had her day in court.
Yeah, Marcia, you'll remember that in April, she surprised everyone by announcing that she was going to be resigning from the state Senate. You know, she had been in the legislature for 22 years, so it was a complete surprise. And when she announced, she cited depression and her gambling problem. And then my colleague Gordon Russell and I reported the next day that she was actually under federal investigation. And so then on this week, we was the news that she was in court and pleaded guilty to 1 count of wire fraud. It was revealed that she had stolen $147,000. Most of that money she stole from her own campaign when she ran for re-election, both in 2015 and 2019 to the state Senate, and also stole $53,000 in contributions to the Louisiana Democratic Party, which she had headed from 2012 to 2020.
And so did you mentioned that the problem she admits to is the gambling addiction. And this is what really was the root of the problems that she's now facing.
Yeah, we don't know if that's the full story. We do know that in 2019, she was forced to acknowledge that she had a gambling problem, that she had done an unusual thing where she had banned herself from Louisiana casinos and then was caught being in a casino, and that information was leaked to WWL-TV back again in 2019. And she has talked about her gambling problem. She really hasn't said very much exactly what she did that has caused her to make this plea to the one charge. We don't know if she just doesn't want to say anything. There's all sorts of speculation. Is she actually going to testify against somebody else? We just don't know that. The next shoe to drop, I guess, is December 7th, Marcia. The judge is scheduled to decide whether she's going to go to prison or not.
Oh, this is just so disconcerting and sorrowful for so many people, a lot of her supporters here in this area, because she was, like you said, a leader in politics here.
Yeah, she came from the Bold organization that her dad had headed with Jim Singleton, who served many years in the city council, Ken Carter, who was an assessor and ran for mayor, later became a successful lawyer. Karen Carter Peterson was a political force. in the legislature, very, very liberal, no apologies there, strong, pro-choice on abortion, gay rights, against tax cuts for the wealthy, presided over the Democratic Party when, like the party throughout this, the Democratic parties throughout the South really fell into decline. So that didn't go so well. Also, along the way, she gained a reputation as being very vindictive. She would berate people who disagreed with her and go after them. And sort of funny enough, as chair of the party, she would not talk to the media. So there are some people out there who are sort of lamenting her downfall, and there are other people saying, well, she got what she deserves.
And Tyler, you know, after the Voting Rights Act was passed in '65, and you saw this proliferation of new black political organizations, because they had the voting power by then, and one of them was Bold, and her dad, Ken Carter, was one of the leaders. So he was one of the early political leaders in that era of black politics, the post-voting rights. And Ken Carter was a very affable man. He was very popular, very pleasant man, and he became assessor. And he ran for mayor, didn't make it for mayor, but did well and was a real community leader.
Yeah, absolutely right, Errol. You talk to anybody about Ken Carter, and they will talk about what a wonderful man he was, how friendly and nice he was. And there's a surprise kind of how things have ended up with Karen Carter Peterson, because she seemed to have a lot of promise. Remember, she ran for Congress in 2006. Again, she ran in 2021, finishing second both times, but clearly a very, very intelligent woman. She's blaming her downfall on gambling. Again, we don't know the full story yet.
All right, Tyler, thanks a lot. Let's go over to Don right now. And Aquarium and Insectarium, they're coming together.
They are joining forces in a major way. The Insectarium was a victim of COVID, for sure, shut down, and people said, what's going to happen? I loved the butterfly garden. I loved the cafe where I could go challenge my bug appetite. It is coming back, and it's coming back in a major way, combined with the aquarium. Next summer, hopefully around this time, we'll see the official opening of the Audubon Aquarium and Insectarium in the site where the aquarium is now. The new lobby entrance will be about 30 yards downriver from where it currently is. They're taking over the space that had been the IMAX theater in the aquarium. That shut down actually before COVID. Apparently, IMAX was aging technology, and IMAX movie theaters across the country aren't staying open and operational. So there's a huge space within the aquarium that they can repurpose. If you drive in the French Quarter right now, you'll be able to see some of the glass and steel structure that is that new lobby entryway. What will happen is, as guests or visitors go in, they'll be able to turn left for the aquarium experience, or right for the arthropod experience, or do both in a day. It's a $41 million upgrade to the facility on the riverfront that is celebrating this Labor Day weekend its 32nd birthday, and says they've had millions of visitors. The hope is that as tourism really comes back in this post-COVID world, it will be the first major museum opening in the city of New Orleans. It was a major opening after Katrina when it came back. It's been kind of a driving force for tourism in that part of the city, and to have the Insectarium and the aquarium together should draw more people who like both. Some interesting tidbits: insects don't live long. Their lifespan is short. There are bug experts who are starting to collect the bugs, because not only does the Insectarium need the actual live bugs, but it needs them to establish their colonies, and that takes some time. You know, if you remember the old Insectarium where it was in the Customs House, there was a beautiful glassed-in display of an ant colony where you could really watch the ants work. Well, that takes the ants a while to build. So some of that kind of thing is going on behind the scenes now. In the new facility, there will be a butterfly garden. It will not be similar in size to the one that was at the Customs House, which was just this huge, expansive room. They say actually their goal is to make it feel more intimate, so your experience with the butterflies can be more intimate and close instead of in big arched ceilings. It is the most extensive aquarium overhaul, too, since that 1990 opening. Just more space, more space for birds in the Amazon rainforest area, more space, where else? The rainforest is the biggest change, adding more birds there. Waldenberg Park is also getting $7 million in improvements as part of this whole renovation. And that will be, so it's more accommodating to the festivals that happen on that part of the river. So we've really seen in the last couple of years major development from the foot of Canal Street and then going on into the French Quarter with the arrival of the Four Seasons Hotel and condominiums, the new ferry terminal, now the improvements at Waldenberg Park and the aquarium and Insectarium, which is slated to open next summer. Construction's well underway. They're hoping to make all of these changes without having to ever close the aquarium to visitors.
That's what I was going to ask. The aquarium is open.
The aquarium is open to visitors. The Insectarium hasn't been seen in a couple years, but the aquarium is open and visitors can still go and experience the sharks and the turtles and the penguins, and all of that is still there. It's just a matter of when they'll combine and reopen with a new lobby, a new place to go in.
And a whole fresh batch of new bugs.
A whole fresh batch of new bugs, including the cafe where you can eat them if you so choose.
Hey, Dawn, can we be sure that the penguins won't eat the ants?
They shouldn't be in the same structure. They'll be in the separate wings of the newish facility. So.
Okay, all right. Thanks a lot, Dawn. John, let's go back on over to you. And a local landlord, owner of apartment developments, is run afoul with the judge. The federal judge.
Yes, indeed. Federal bankruptcy judge this week seized control of 6 properties, 5 in Orleans Parish, that are from entities controlled by Joshua Bruno, who has become kind of, by low-income housing advocates, reviled as a landlord. He owns several properties. The properties that are in bankruptcy now are total about 500 units. The biggest of them, Oakmont, is in Algiers. That's been the scene of just some horrendous conditions that have gotten worse during COVID and then during and after Hurricane Ida. The federal judge, Meredith Graybill, basically called Bruno a liar, essentially, and said that he'd been shunting money from those entities away, into other areas, potential fraud. She cited $800,000 in hurricane insurance money that just disappeared. Most of the tenants, the city took the rare step at Oakmont this year of clearing the place out, ordering people and helping people relocate. It's almost cleared out. I was by there the other day. It's sort of like nature is taking over again out there. It's a big property. It's 13 acres. Squatters have come in. There's been a lot of violence, fires out there. So it's sort of been a nightmare scenario for advocates. This is a big victory for them. Eventually he'll get out of bankruptcy, but there's not a lot of hope that he holds on to these properties now that they're going to be in the hands of the keeper that the judge ordered.
And so what happens to tenants who are still in these properties right now?
They're going to be evicted. They're going to have to leave. There are very few lease, renters in the properties left. There's some at another property in Algiers that has 100 some odd units. But they're going to have to, but it's all, Oakmont, they're clearing out they're the ones who have to leave. The other properties, that there's a keeper a trustee that's going to come in and take the insurance money and presumably fix them up and get them back into the marketplace and get people renting them.
It's 500 units. It's a lot of units.
It's a lot of units.
Okay, thanks a lot, John. Tyler, we're going to wrap up with you. So tell us about the budding romance in Baton Rouge.
That's a good way to wrap up, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah, Edwin Edwards died just about a year ago, and on the 1-year anniversary, Trina Edwards, his 43-year-old widow, was on a radio show in Baton Rouge and talked openly about her relationship with John Alario, who you may remember served twice as Speaker of the House and twice as President of the Senate, and all served 48 years in the legislature. No one has served longer, just a legislative powerhouse, a master of the Senate during his final years there, under both Bobby Jindal and Governor John Bell Edwards. Well, Trina Edwards on the radio in Baton Rouge professed her love for John Alario as something that was not a secret in political circles, but was not known to the public at large. And there was a moment where Jim Angster, the host, said, if he asked, would you marry him? And she said, yes.
So the pressure's on John, huh?
the pressure's on John Hilario. So later that afternoon, I asked him if he had been listening to her appearance on the radio. And in fact, he said he had been, and he wasn't ready to decide, or at least say publicly, whether he will say yes. But he did say that he has bought a home in Baton Rouge, where she is now living, and he's splitting his time between there and his longtime home in Westwego.
So we can only speculate, but what do you think the late Governor Edwards thinks of this?
Yes, certainly we can't.
Can't say for sure. No.
We can't say for sure. That's right. What do you say, Governor? Edwin Edwards was, he was in his early 90s when he died, and he certainly knew that Trina would end up with someone else. Funny enough, she says she has a type because, first she was with Edwin Edwards, who was an old man. John Hilario was 78 years old. But again, he assumed that she was going to end up with somebody. Just as a side note, I did a story where I spoke to three of Governor Edwards' older children, Victoria, Anna, and Stephen, and they wished Trina and John Hilario the best, and said, but they would like their father's remains, which she had dug up and cremated, and they're now in her home, and I guess maybe a mantelpiece or something, to take those remains and put them back in the cemetery, reinter them next to the ashes of Edwin Edwards' first wife, Elaine, who he was married to for 40 years until 1989.
And their mother, the
Trina Edwards.
Yeah. That's
right. And Trina Edwards does not seem so keen on the idea of reinterring those ashes next to Edwin Edwards' first wife.
All right. That's a nice way to wrap up our show, talking about a budding romance. And now we're going to go back over to E for other stories.
I think the first thing Edwards want to know is how much money he has. Because I think Edwards is thinking always begin at that. We're number one at the Press Club Awards this past Saturday in the coveted category of the best talk show. Informed Sources won first place.
Yeah, we're happy about that.
And so we're honored for that. And congratulations to Marcia and the staff. And like all these people on this show and others, that they're part of this too. So we're just glad to.
So congratulations to everybody.
Yeah,
everybody's on the show.
Yeah,
we are very pleased about that. Congrats to you, E. Don, over to you.
Well, ready or not, it's football season. The Saints tackle the Houston Texans in the first preseason game at Houston a week from tomorrow.
Okay. John, real quick.
Well, Albert Woodfox died this week at 75 years old. At 43 years in solitary confinement, became a prisoner rights advocate extraordinaire and a Pulitzer finalist for a book he wrote.
Tyler, real fast.
Yeah, you'll know that in Kansas, they just voted to keep abortion rights, and that will keep our eye on whether that becomes an issue in Louisiana, where abortion has now been abolished.
All right. Thanks a lot, guys, for being here, and thank you all for joining us. We'll see you again next week for Informed Sources. Have a good evening. Bye, guys.
Informed Sources is made possible in part by Susie and Pierre G. Villery.
With a lifetime of passion for public television, we are pleased to help underwrite Informed Sources.
Please join us in supporting WYES TV.